Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Monday Overreaction Show right here on the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Anwar Richardson, and we have a lot to get to today. Thanks to our sponsor, therogueshop.com. Go to promo code Orangebloods for Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and more. Anwar, it was a Rogue Shop kind of weekend. Might end up being a Rogue Shop kind of week when it's all said and done. How was your weekend?
Good. Let's see. I mean, I had, there's always like birthday party weekends where it seems like every kid has a birthday party or something. So Max had a basketball event on Friday night. We had a tournament on Saturday over at St. Michael's. Then we did a birthday party at Urban Air on Saturday night, another birthday party on Sunday, then went play date on Sunday afternoon. I mean, they didn't make it much past the Cowboys game. I mean, probably, I don't think they made it to halftime. Those guys were knocked out on the couch. So pretty busy, pretty active. Got to keep them active, man. I'm trying to play good dad, single dad here. So I'm trying to do the best I can. What about you?
I worked all weekend. So I didn't spend a lot of time with my kids, and after listening to you, I feel like a bad father when it was all said and done, because I was definitely holed off last night during the Cowboys game, like just completely separated from the family, and then riding all day Sunday, junior day on Saturday, and then of course we had the big news on Friday night with the Longhorns jumping in to the portal and picking up A.D. Mitchell, the Georgia transfer wide receiver. A lot of stuff to get to today. Again, we've got the A.D. Mitchell news. We've got the Junior Day recap, which we can jump into and talk a little bit about. I thought there were some interesting things that came out of that you might even find interesting as a you're more than a casual viewer of recruiting, but you're not a diehard either. No. So I think I've got some stuff that somewhere in between those two things will be interesting to people. And then Jonte Cook given his 5th star by Rivals today, already on campus, the DeSoto wide receiver that signed with Texas in December, really performed well in Orlando at the All-America week and game itself that he participated in January, the beginning of this month. He's now officially a Rivals 5-star. So lots of stuff to get into, but I think
Can we get the bad stuff out the way real quick?
Sure.
Your Cowboys, how are you feeling?
Oh, man, look. The better team won that game last night. And it was a rough, gritty, tough game separated by the team that made the fewer plays won the ball game. So it's hard to be really salty today. I didn't feel like something was lost. You know, if they'd somehow beaten San Francisco last night, they would lose in Philly next weekend. And the moment that Tony Pollard's leg broke, the Cowboys season ended last night. You know, it's a little bit like when you remember in The Predator when you've seen The Predator, right, with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but I feel like 30 years ago, but sure.
Well, when Apollo Creed, who is still living from the Rocky IV movie at that point, and is in the Predator movie, when the Predator cuts off his arm and it just blood's all spewing all over the place, even though he's not dead yet, he's gonna die. That's what the Cowboys were last night when Pollard got hurt. They were still playing hard and they still had hopes to win that game, but their season was over. Eric jumps in. I need a hug today. Cowboys just kicked me in the nuts. Dak isn't an elite quarterback and never will be. I don't feel like I got kicked. I was disappointed. I was disappointed that they didn't win the game. But the reality of the Dallas Cowboys is that they're a divisional round playoff team. That's who they are. They're not better than that. Dak isn't better than that. And like when you understand the reality of your plight, it will keep you from, I think, feeling like you've been kicked in the nuts. See, Eric had hope that there was more to the Cowboys than that. And I expected the 49ers to win that game going in. So I didn't quite feel like that. I'm not super dejected this morning because Dallas is kind of who we thought they were.
Okay, so it kind of sucks because there still were people catch, and maybe just an every year thing, but still were Cowboys fans who had hope. Cowboys fans that even Jerry had hope.
Well, fans are delusional by definition; they're fanatics.
But Jerry even had the hope that this was a Super Bowl team. So I mean, it's tough when Tony Pollard goes out and you go to yourself, oh, it's going to be tough. And you still think to yourself, but they still have Ezekiel Elliott. It's funny how we've just bypassed.
That's not what crossed into my mind.
Well, it's amazing how we've just bypassed Ezekiel. Like, oh my God, what are you going to do?
Ezekiel Elliott hasn't been good for a number of years now.
I know he's paid.
He's not quite glue factory material. Like, I don't want him put down so that we can, like, science can do something with his body. Like, I'm not quite there yet with Zeke, but he's not a guy that I get enthusiastic about when he's on the field outside of short yardage situations. I mean, the Cowboys had one playmaker on offense when Pollard got hurt. That was CeeDee Lamb. And the offense played like that in the final 30 minutes. And look, Dak Prescott is a perfectly fine football player, but he's not an elite quarterback. And I don't know that I would describe him as near elite, right? The elite tier of quarterbacking in the NFL has Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. How sick was he yesterday? Like, we won't get into a Joe Burrow discussion today, but wow. You saw that guy play in person in college, and I feel like in 50 years from now, you'll still be referencing the fact that you saw him and kind of his breakout performance as a quarterback. But you've got those two guys. You've got Josh Allen. Then there's like another tier where you've got the Herberts of the world. Maybe a Jalen Hurts belongs in that. Dak Prescott is somewhere close to that group, but he's nowhere near the elite of the elite group. And he was outplayed last night by Brock Purdy. That happened. Brock Purdy wasn't good, but he didn't turn the ball over. And Dak Prescott was not good, but he did turn the ball over. And it was a difference in the game.
All right. Well, I just wanted to check in on you. I wanted to see how you were doing. You seem to have accepted it pretty well. So, I'm
in my stages of grief, I'm definitely in acceptance now.
Wow. That's pretty good and quick, by the way.
Much quicker than most Cowboys fans. Like Eric is still in the kick in the nuts stage. He's like in denial of what happened at this point.
Or anger.
Or a lot of the things that come before acceptance. You know who's angry today?
Who's that?
Georgia football fans. Because on Friday night, they were already unhappy about the A.D. Mitchell situation and him ending up at Texas. And we can segue into this part of the conversation. But did you see what happened overnight? One of their two transfer wide receivers. So they got two guys in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. Okay. Dominic Lovett is a small guy. So he's kind of thought as the new slot guy at Georgia. Ra Thomas is the guy they pulled in from Mississippi State that Mississippi State fans were alleging of Georgia what Georgia is alleging of Texas. But he's supposed to be the guy that now replaces A.D. Mitchell on the outside. He got arrested overnight. And it's another – these things – we keep seeing this a lot. Family domestic abuse. Like, it's a bad one.
Yeah.
It's the kind of charge that might keep a guy from playing college football this year. Certainly, like, I don't know what Georgia does. I mean, sometimes schools just keep playing guys and sometimes schools don't. But, I'm guessing he's going to get the old indefinite suspension at this part of the process. And it makes the loss of A.D. Mitchell for Georgia sting a little bit more today. But on the Texas side of things, like that kid's in class, I'm guessing, today. Like A.D. Mitchell, from the time we last did a video together this past week, A.D. Mitchell is now officially a Texas Longhorn. I'd love to get your initial thoughts on what you think this means to the Texas program, pulling in a player who was projected to be wide receiver 1 this season internally. That's what Georgia believed, 2-time defending national champions. It's not an insignificant thing to just go get one of their best players.
So first of all, just on the Georgia thing, the kid who got arrested, it reminds me of why so many coaches hate when their kids go home. And because there's just always that belief, like, you catch, you've done this for years. There's always that belief, like, dang, if we can keep them here on campus, like, things would be great. But there's always that, damn it, whenever they go home, something bad happens. And there's always like that bated breath, like, oh my gosh, you're hoping that something bad doesn't happen, and something bad happens. So, so that portion of it sucks. The A.D. Mitchell thing. Oh, what are you going to say, Catch?
I was just going to, you're so right. I mean, it is that it's why you're, as a college coach, you're scared to death, especially a football coach. You're sending 85 players home into the wilderness, and you just got all those bad influences waiting for you when you get home. I was like running. It was like a Rolodex in my mind of all the kids in the last 30 years that I've heard say they just want to stay like in Austin during breaks and not go home, because inevitably something there is going to happen that, sidetracks them. And they just, all things being equal, prefer not to be in a situation where like something happens.
Yeah, no, that happened. And so, so you, like you said, probably indefinite suspension, all that kind of stuff. Catch, when I started thinking about A.D. Mitchell, you guys started the live show, and I was coming back on from Round Rock that evening, and I was like, I don't think I have enough time to jump on. I've had the time to think about it. First of all, you knew it was kind of that was probably going to happen. You did some, great job of reporting, that likelihood leading up to it. Then it happens, kind of a bam, bam Catch. You kind of report that it happens. And then like 10 seconds later, I think like 80 or somebody else puts it out. And it's like, I think you joked about the shortest scoop you've ever had.
For those that don't know, I mentioned it in Slack, but didn't know that I had a short fuse on how long it would last. I was literally looking at pictures of Lincoln Riley's brisket because I was going to post a picture of the brisket on Orangebloods as a hint that it was done.
Well, the
next thing I know, it's being reported.
Well, like Lincoln's brisket. So went your scoop the same way of Lincoln's brisket. And I've been able to wrap my head around it. This is kind of this will be my overreaction on a Monday, as we are on, the 23rd of January. When I think about what the addition of A.D. Mitchell means to this team, in a team that really needs some offensive firepower, when I think about the damning stat that I read in your 10 thoughts for the weekend, which I commented on, I saw it last night. I always try to wait in the morning to comment on stuff, because I read your stuff in the middle of the night, and I'm always like, maybe I've had a couple of drink or not. So let me just wait until the morning, make sure I feel the same way. I think this guy provides the playmaker that Texas needs. And I think, Catch, when I start thinking about Xavier Worthy and assuming he's not going to have the same year that he had this past year, and I think about the addition of A.D. Mitchell, I look at a team, Catch, that I say, I know it's too early to pour Kool-Aid, but Catch, this should be a team that we're talking about competing in the Big 12 championship, because I can't think of any team, Catch, that will have as many offensive weapons in the Big 12 as Texas will have this year. I don't know how many teams are going to have as good of an offensive line as this team will have, going into this year. There'll be some questions on defense, obviously, But again, we've seen in this league, TCU didn't have the best defense catch, and we saw what they were able to do. But I'm looking at the addition of A.D. Mitchell catch, and I tell myself, why not Texas in 2023? And in fact, I look at it and I'm like, this guy stays healthy for 12 games. This should easily be a 10-win team. Like, that's how good he is. I think that's how important his impact is. I don't know. Like, to me, the world kind of opens up a lot more with A.D. Mitchell kind of on the 40 acres.
You mentioned the stat that I pulled out of my you-know-what yesterday. For those that don't know the stat. So part of the lead of my article, my 10 thoughts on the weekend last night and this morning, is just about we all probably underrated the impact that the loss of Isaiah Nayor had on last year's team, that in real time it was hard to know because he never played in a game for Texas. So this idea that you can't lose what you never had is a thing, but I don't know that it was a thing for Steve Sarkisian, because with Nayor out of the lineup, the combination of Casey Kane, Savion Red, Troy O'Meara, and Ajay Hall, all four of those players played at that position during the course of last season. And in 12 regular season games, that foursome combined for 11 catches for 143 yards and a single touchdown in 12 games.
That just say that again. One more time. 11 catches.
11 catches for $143 and a single touchdown. What it translates to is one reception for 12 yards and 0.1 touchdowns per game. It's so abysmal. My jaw just got left open. It's really bad. In fact, I did this yesterday. You could triple that production. If I told you that the receiver opposite Xavier Worthy this season catches 33 passes for 432 yards and 3 touchdowns, that's not going to do a whole lot for you.
No.
You're like, yeah. But that's 3 times the contributions of 4 players combined. It really tells you what kind of black hole existed in one of the 11 players on the field this season for the Longhorns. I think if A.D. Mitchell can stay healthy, like, that's a key component of this, because he's a little bit like Jordan Whittington so far in his Georgia career. He's been banged up. He missed a lot of this past season with a high ankle sprain. You can't say he's really injury prone, but he hasn't really had a full season yet as a starter. But if he can stay on the field, suddenly you've got a threat, a big play threat that when he is healthy is a guy that can take the top off of a defense. He's a guy that can body guys defensively and one-on-one beat guys at the high point for a ball or in the end zone or whatever. And Texas hasn't had that. You add the addition of Jonte Cook, who, if you're just joining in, I mentioned at the top of the show, he got his 5th star from Rivals today.
Congrats.
And you've got Isaiah Nayor coming back. Then now you're 5 deep at receiver in a world where you only had 2 guys a year ago, not including Jatavion Sanders, who would make for 6, and in this case would make for 3. So you've doubled in the last month the number of legitimate options you have in the passing game versus the last time you played in a game, which ironically was Casey Kane's best game of the season by far, and catching 4 passes for, I think, like 101 yards, the majority of which came on a Hail Mary at the end of the game that was fairly insignificant. So before that play, a breakout game for him was like 3 catches for 50 yards, which, hey, if you're giving that every week, at least that's something. That was the best game by a mile. Steve Sarkisian finally shouldn't have excuses in the passing game. Now he just needs a quarterback to play pretty good football. And I think you're right, Anwar. There's no reason Texas should play. in the Big 12 championship game. I won't give away what my preseason prediction for this team is going to be yet, but there's nobody in the Big 12 right now that on paper can match what Texas will put on the field in terms of athletes in the passing game, on offense. They should be really, really good. And they have an offensive line that should only be at least as good as it was a year ago, barring injuries. And this is a team that you can start to see putting the pieces together. And I think for the next 8 months, we're going to talk about quarterback. It's all there now. And you could also make the case that this was part of the thing that maybe plagued Quinn Ewers a little bit, in that he lacked that one extra weapon, a little bit like the Cowboys did last night, where when Tony Pollard went down, it was CeeDee Lamb, a little bit of Dalton Schultz, and that's kind of it. Michael Gallup was glue factory material this season. And that's kind of what Texas had this season on that opposite end of their star playmaker on the outside. So I really think this is an underrated pickup for the Longhorns, because I don't think that most people truly have the correct perspective of just how poor that spot opposite Worthy on the outside at receiver was for this Texas team last year.
And the thing is, Catch, let's go ahead and get into it, because that's we got to have the conversation about AD Mitchell. We have to have the honest conversation about why AD Mitchell is here. There's a belief from those who are close to the situation. They just didn't know what they had at receiver. Xavier Worthy took a step backwards in the minds of people within the building, right? Jordan Whittington stayed healthy for one of the first times in his career, but the question was, what can he do that again? Even though as a guy who's coming back, Isaiah Nayer is coming off an ACL injury. What does Isaiah Nayer going to look like when healthy? There's no guarantees as far as that is concerned. And so there was a kind of a look in belief, like at that receiver room, like, this has got to get better. Because when we started hearing about when the transfer portal was going to open, the thing that we kept hearing was receiver was going to be the number one priority for the portal because of the question marks that were there. And I know some people have asked in the chat about different guys and why they didn't play or this and that. I mean, unfortunately, guys, and again, just honest conversations, if guys were ready, they would play. There wasn't a whole lot standing between guys where you're like, man, this room is so deep that no one else can get on the field. Like that wasn't the conversation that we had last season.
Nobody was standing on a table for any of those dudes.
No, like it just they weren't ready. None of those guys weren't ready. And so while we hear stuff about, guys being salty and, about NIL deals and what other guys are getting that are just getting here and all these other kind of things. Like at the end of the day, Steve Sarkisian needed to have a receiver that checked the boxes. And he's been looking, Catch. He's been looking since one of the things I wrote about, he's been looking since he got here, right? He got Xavier Worthy as soon as he got here, a few months later. He's been going in the transfer portal, looking, it's desperately trying to find guys who can have that impact, recruiting guys that can have that impact. You bring in an AD Mitchell. Now, all of a sudden, to your point, now, if you have Xavier Worthy, you have an AD Mitchell, you'll have, a John Tate Cook that's coming in. You have Isaiah Nayer that's there. Like all of a sudden, now you have way more weapons at your disposal. And, you don't need Catch. You don't need 5 of those guys to hit. But to your point, you got to have more than one. That's and that one who was hitting, we know he could hit at a more frequent level. We know that's capable, and we know that's in him. I think Xavier's closer to having 1,200 yards this season, upcoming season, or 13 as opposed to what he had this past season. So
I'm buying all the Xavier Worthy stock, by the way. Anybody wants to sell their Worthy stock, I'm ready. I want it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because give me an Xavier Worthy that's got something to prove and wants to really, do what he needs to do, get to the NFL, and then rise up to the competition. Because he's got competition now. Like he's got competition in here. I think AD makes the room better. And then, so we'll get into preseason predictions at some point this year. But it's hard not to think in January, if everyone stays healthy, this should not be the best team in the Big 12.
I think the trickle down of what having a guy like AD Mitchell on the field does is really significant. He suddenly is the guy that I think that Steve Sarkisian will want to use to take the top off of defense. Suddenly, you're not asking Xavier Worthy to be the player that he's not. Mm-hmm. And you start using him in situations that best take advantage of his talent, throwing in the ball short, intermediate routes, on the move, letting this guy make plays in space. That's when he's at his best. He's not Cliff Branch of the Oakland Raiders. He's not just run a go route and our quarterback's going to heave it as far as he can. Like, that didn't work this year. Ever. I'm going to put it on a tee. I mean, just like you did for me, the numbers in your column this week stood out. Mm-hmm. And the Casey Kane deep ball from Ewers at the end of the Alamo Bowl was the only deep ball they really hit on all season long.
It's the deepest pass all year long, catch. Was a desperation.
50 yards?
49. That was it. That was it.
Considering they threw the ball deep 6 times a game at least, it means they never hooked up with one. And this changes suddenly, not only now is Xavier Worthy, I think, going to be used differently in 2023, but he's going to see fewer double teams. If AD Mitchell makes an impact, then teams got to play him honest too. And suddenly, if you can run the ball even a little bit, it's hard to defend Worthy, Mitchell, Whittington, and Sanders in the passing game without having somewhere on the field at least one matchup that you really love. And it felt like teams...
By the way, Catch, just add in just for 10 seconds, with an offensive line that can probably protect you as well. Go ahead. You can see why this is important. Again, this opens up everything in the passing game in ways that it wasn't available on paper and certainly in execution in 2022. I can't overestimate, though, it's also important that if Mitchell gets hurt, the thing that Mitchell gives Texas that it didn't have a year ago is a high-level insurance policy. A year ago when Nayor gets hurt, there's nobody there. Now you've got Mitchell to be that A guy. If he gets hurt, having Jonte Cook, a 5-star wide receiver prospect who's on campus for the spring, available is a big deal. It means that Isaiah Nayor doesn't have to rush back. They don't have to treat the Troy O'Meary treatment doesn't have to be in play where you're so needy at wide receiver that you're like, let's just give it a chance. Let's move it up a little bit. Like, you can let that guy recover. He'll be 12 months removed from that injury in August. At that point, you can really start to turn him loose and seeing how close to 100% he can get. But you don't have to be like, oh, let's throw him in the spring. If he's ready, he's ready. But there's no need to rush because you've got guys. And you add in a Ryan Niblett who can work in at the slot. Maybe you've got 6 receivers. And there's suddenly, I won't go so far as to say an abundance of riches because they got to perform first before we can start talking like that. But if you get good quarterback play and having better receivers helps. It helps. Look, Brock Purdy is doing what he's doing in part because he's got Deebo Samuel, because he's got George Kittle, because he's got Christian McCaffrey, because Brandon Ayuk is like their 4th or 5th weapon and on any given day can be kind of an impact player in the NFL. It helps to have
talent. It helps Joe Burrow. As good as Joe Burrow is, it helps to have T. Higgins as like your second or third option. That somebody that good is your second or third best receiver. Like, that's why it's important to keep recruiting and stacking up talent. And that's why Georgia and Alabama win every year, because they've got 50 good players and not 20.
Catch. He got hurt early in the year, and they still won a national title without him.
He came back, caught touchdowns in the playoff games, and they were like, awesome, we still would have won.
You know, like, it's great. Like, to your point, one guy, it's an excellent point. One guy derailed the passing game for Texas. One guy, one injury.
It happened. It's true. It's a fact.
One guy, it was done. Like, there was nowhere to go. It was either Xavier Worthy or no one else. And not to say Jordan didn't have a good season, but we're talking about elite of the elite, first team kind of Big 12 kind of stuff. One guy, it derailed it. And like, to your point, Georgia loses its starting receiver for most of the season. And then they just go, oh, well, we'll just throw in some other guy, someone else, and we'll just keep it moving. It is the difference. It is stacking the room. And it is I think it's the thing that, Texas fans and everyone else has to get used to, is that Sarkisian is going to stack that room. Like, feelings be damned. This is big boy football. This is big boy thing that they're establishing. And they're not going to sit there and just rely on one person. And if it doesn't happen, like, oh, well, no, they're going to stack that room on the offensive line standpoint, stack it from the receiver standpoint. Tight ends, like, have enough talent where one person just doesn't all of a sudden derail your season. Yeah,
I mean, it's really as simple as that. And I think it's also important to note, by the way, we'll get Tom's super chat question. I'll make my other point here in a second. What up, Tom?
Oh, my man.
He also thinks that big things are ahead of Texas this season. Sark needs to get 10 wins. Anwar, I've been thinking that I might just go 10-2 this year, just because that's what the record should be in year 3.
Yeah.
And if I go 8-4 and he goes 8-4, everybody's going to be like, well, he met expectations. That's what they did this year. It was like, well, he went 8-4, and isn't that what you predicted? And it's like, well, that doesn't mean that that's good enough.
Correct. Like, if you're like, well, Anwar, he only worked like 3 days a week this week, and they're like, well, I figured that. That doesn't necessarily mean I did a great job. You just knew that, hey, he's only working 3 days this week. Ain't that something? But I can't come to you, Catch, and say, Catch, you knew I was going to work 3 days. Like, what are you tripping about? Like, no, like, to your point, I think, to me, Catch, with the talent that's there, and we got to see, the defense that's got to come around, but I feel like this defensive staff has done a pretty good job, so far. And the year 1 was a little tricky, but I felt like it got a lot better in year 2. And you've got the guys who are going to grow up and mature, so on and so forth. To me, I don't think putting 10 out on the table is some sort of weird math that you tell yourself, like, what are you doing? Like, no, like, there. You got a 5-star, quarterback that's out there. You've got an all-star, 2 great receivers or 2 really good receivers. You've got a future NFL draft pick at tight end. You've got guys coming in that should be able to compete at the running back position, whether it's Cedric Baxter or any of the other guys that are already on campus, right? I mean, you're stacked on the offensive line. Like, we're having a conversation, Catch, about offensive line, about which good offensive lineman can you put into certain positions. Remember, the conversations we've always had, at least since I've been here, has been like, who do you not want out there?
Can you just find 5?
Like, you and I'm not trying to have my boy catch strays today, but you and I argued over Zach Shackelford for years. Like, that's where you and I were at. This is where we were arguing over, damn, he's no Catch. He's good. Like, this is,
because the conversation would turn into, I think he's just a guy. And you would be like, yeah, but they don't have 5, like, they don't have 5 guys better than him, so he's at least valuable in the sense that you can put him on the field and not feel like the world is going to end. That sounds like some of these other conversations we were talking about where it's like 8-4, he did it. Like,
yeah.
It's like we have reached a point after a decade plus where these conversations that we're having are not ideal. Like kind of dating somebody, and it's like, well, Anwar, she doesn't hit you. Oh, well, she's a keeper.
That's what happens when you Alamo Bowl, Texas Bowl, no bowls. Like that's kind of where you kind of at. Like, yeah, but no, I think we're at the point, Catch, where it should be a time to raise the standard, raise the expectations, because it's not a because I know sometimes how people think, Catch, and they think sometimes we do it to get like a gotcha moment with the coach or something to that effect. Like you guys are saying that, so if he fails, you guys just say, aha. No, I just really believe there's enough talent that's out there for this 10 should be very, very reasonable. More, and you and I very rarely have said that.
This is an interesting question from Tom. The reason why this is really interesting is because I feel like we do this every year. And in January, it always looks good for Texas in this, let's take our talent and match it up against the other schools in the Big 12's talent. Because a year ago, nobody would say that Kansas State's wide receivers or quarterbacks or anything, or TCU's. At the end of this season, people were saying, some people anyway, were saying that TCU has the best wide receiver room in the country. But nobody was saying that when they made their preseason prediction. So, Tom, you asked a really good question. I'm going to attempt to help you. Let's just go through them. Quarterback, a bunch. Until Quinn starts playing better. Although Kansas State loses their quarterbacks, TCU loses Max Duggan, Oklahoma returns State. Dylan Gabriel, which you would say Oklahoma feels like they've got a quarterback advantage at this point.
Oklahoma State lost Spencer Sanders.
Which is
for whatever
addition by subtraction potentially, but it's hard to point to exactly who they're going to have. So, yeah. So really, probably Oklahoma, because Baylor, the Blake Shapen buzz has died. Like that guy's just got to start playing well. Kansas will take Jalen Daniels over Quinn Ewers at this point.
So you would take Jalen over Quinn?
What's that?
You would take Jalen over Quinn?
I would. Texas wins the Big 12 with Jalen Daniels last year. If you get him for 12 games, which his style of play and the fact that he's a bit of an undersized guy, like Sam, when you're a guy that runs the ball, and look, Max Duggan was a guy that at the end he had to play through some injuries. So, but yes, I would take Jalen Daniels right now over Quinn Ewers, and Texas wins the Big 12 in 2023. Because I know what I'm getting in Daniels. I still have no idea what Quinn Ewers is.
That's an interesting. I don't feel. I gotta go look through his numbers. I don't feel like he was that great down the stretch, Catch. I mean, he didn't get hurt
play until like the last couple of games of the season.
Yeah, I don't.
It wasn't until the bowl game that Daniels. Go look at the bowl game.
I'm gonna look up his stats right now.
He wasn't healthy. He wasn't right until the bowl game, and he was fantastic in the bowl game. Not good. He was fantastic in the bowl game. I think when we talk about the running back position.
The bowl game is out of control. He was 37 of 55 for 544 and 5 touchdowns.
I'm just saying, when he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, now so
that guy was playing on a high ankle sprain, and a dude with his skill set on a high ankle sprain is like playing on one leg.
Yeah, I mean, because Texas, he was 17 to 26 for 230, 2 touchdowns and a interceptions. Kansas State, he was 20 of 32 for $168, had a passer rating of 106.6.
No, he wasn't. They just played him to play him because, otherwise the season was going to end and they were going to have bullets left in the chamber. But let's move on for quarterback to answer Tom's question. Running backs. I can't think of a running back room I would take over Texas's. Understand that TCU's losing their top 2 guys. Kansas State's lost Deuce. Oklahoma's losing Eric Gray. Most of the best running backs in the Big 12, Baylor returns their guy. They had a freshman this year that was a borderline all Big 12 pick. So they probably would take their – but if I went to the Baylor coaches and was like, yo, I'll make you a trade your one guy for Texas's 3, he'd take the Texas 3. There's no other running back in the Big 12 with the recruiting profile of Cedric Baxter. So there's just not. There's no other. Oklahoma would be the only school that could attract a 5-star level running back, and they don't have that guy on campus. Wide receivers, TCU, yes. Before they lost Quentin Johnston and some of their best players. You take Johnston out of the mix, they still have some speed, but they lose the first-round draft. They lose the Xavier Worthy of their team, and I think TCU fans would say, and a lot of people, most would say at this point that Johnston is a better player than Worthy. I don't know. I think it's closer than people think, but I get it. Tight end, Jatavion Sanders is the best in the Big 12. Offensive line, I'll just say Texas probably has a top 3 O-line in the Big 12 at a minimum. That's fair, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know the specifics on all the other ones, but that's
me either. So that's why I'm just kind of a safety net projection. If we go over to defense, that's where there's some interesting questions. Because I think Texas's defensive tackles are as good as any in the Big 12, but I don't know that I would say that about their pass rush. And I don't know that I would say that about their linebacker unit. I know Jalen Ford may be the best linebacker in the Big 12, but it's an empty room of proven players without him. And I love Anthony Hill, but he's never played in a college game yet. So I don't know. I don't know about the defense across the board.
Okay.
But offensively, I think Texas at this point, when you look at it on paper, I think their position groups shape up really nicely. At worst, I think every single Texas position group is in the top 3 of the conference. Because I don't know that I can find more than 2 quarterbacks I'd take over Quinn Ewers, even with the season that he had. With Duggan gone, I mean, I don't know. Are you taking more? I'll concede Dylan Gabriel a little bit. I don't think he's great, but he's pretty good. I'm conceding Jalen Daniels, who I love, but there's nobody else that I'm conceding at that point.
Catch, I just want to, hold on. I'm looking up something real quick, and I would agree. So just for whatever the conversation is worth that we're having, because you mentioned something on defense, and we got, there are going to be question marks there. I wanted to look it up and just make sure I was correct. TCU's defense was ranked 5th in the Big 12 last season, Catch, 95th in the country. Now we know they may have been 80th until that last game.
Well, Texas boosted their numbers up. What would it look like without that Texas game where they didn't allow any points?
Yeah. So we're talking about 5th in the Big 12, nearly 100th in the country. I say it all to say, like,
they played for the national championship.
So we got to redefine, and I think this is where I think, Catch, where I think this is where you could probably appreciate what I'm about to say when, sometimes I say things about like, well, how many 5 stars did it take to, like, for me, everyone always wants it. And I feel like when we talk to Texas fans, they want everything to be perfect. Like they want to have the 5-star quarterback, the amazing offensive line, the outstanding receivers, the 5 stars on the defensive side of the ball, right? Like everything has to be perfect. And I think this is what I'm saying. Sometimes it just doesn't have to be. Like there are enough teams that are finding success without having every single component checking the box. Like, and that's where I'm at. Like, look, yeah, it would be great if you had outstanding deep, like you said, Anthony Hill, if he pans out and he's an outstanding guy, so on and so forth. The secondary where they've got the kid from Arkansas coming in, like all that would be great. Catch if every single guy checks the box, the majority of this team is going to go to the NFL. Like the recruiting rankings are great, the transfer poll is amazing. Or you could just take what you have and say, you know what, we'll just find a way to win with what we have. And everything doesn't have to be perfect. That's what I'm saying going into this whole situation. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be good enough. And I think Texas at this point is good enough.
I really think it's an excellent point, Anwar. And I think part of it is Texas has never had a TCU type season that TCU just had. Like really and truly, when Texas has been great, so 2004, 2005, 2008, 2009, like legitimately great. There were legitimately NFL players everywhere. This was at a time when Texas was putting more guys into the NFL than any school in the country. So that's what their reference point is. But TCU fans will go back for the rest of time. They'll be like, we can get to the playoffs. We don't have to have a perfect team. You know what we need? Max Duggan.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, we just need elite quarterback play to get us back. And it is the thing that it is the tide that lifts all boats. Now, you might not be able to win a national championship without almost the perfect player at all of the various positions. Mm-hmm. But is that really the goal right now?
Correct.
The real goal is to win the Big 12. And TCU has proven you can be shitty on defense, statistically inept. I mean, 95th in the country is bad.
I mean, Texas was that just a little, about for Kwiatkowski's first season.
That's the Vance Bedford defenses. Come on, man. That's like, that can get you fired. Sorry, Vance, for that stray. And it means that really every show we should be doing for the next 8 months should just be quarterback shows.
Yeah.
Because it really is all that matters. Because if you tell me nothing else other than, and I said this last year, if you tell me that Quinn Ewers has a 160 quarterback rating or better, Texas is winning the Big 12. I don't need to hear. Now look, reality could play out and he has a 160 season quarterback rating and then he plays like Dak Prescott in the Big 12 championship game and Texas loses. Touche. But all things being equal, no statistical anomalies in the final game in the Big 12 championship. If over 12 games you're getting a 160 level player, which means he's a little bit better than Casey Thompson was 2 years ago. Mm. That's it. If Texas can get quarterback play just an itsy bit better than Casey Thompson from 2021, Texas wins the Big 12. Instead, Texas got Quinn Ewers in his 132 year where, and look, Sam had a 132 year. Most guys that play as true freshmen, that's where they end up, is somewhere in that negative territory where you're just like, blah. But if it can get not out of this world better, he doesn't have to be Caleb Williams. Yeah. Doesn't even have to be Max Duggan. Just has to be better than Casey Thompson. And if they get that, I don't need to hear anything else. I will assume that some of the other pieces fell into place to get to 160, right? Xavier Worthy probably had a bounce back year if Quinn's sitting on a 160 at the end of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't care about the defense, really. Oh, you never did? Oh, you won like 14 in a row. They never played any defense. They never played defense.
To your point, Catch, all the perfect components are the ones when we're talking about competing for a national title. But just to get out the Big 12, like, figure out how, there's been one Big 12 championship appearance since 2009. Like, get there, and then worry about having all the perfect components, to do something in the CFP.
This is a great question from Tom.
First of all, Tom's going to have his own show on his channel this year. Like, that's going to happen.
I love this question. Catch, the NFL drafts on talent and projection. With that said, estimate the QBR for, and I'm going to go efficiency rating because I still haven't mastered the ESPN QBR number. What would be the efficiency rating for Quinn Ewers to be a first-round pick this year? What do I think the probability is? 170. Now you're talking top 10-ish quarterbacks in the country. Now all of his raw talent matters. Because playing at a 170, that's borderline elite. And now suddenly NFL scouts are like, all his best football is in front of him. Look at the improvement that he's made. Now look at the arm. You do all of that stuff, he's a first-round pick. That doesn't mean I think he's the first pick in the first round, because Caleb Williams is going to be in the next draft, and there will be guys that compete for that first-round territory. But I think 170 to 175 would put Quinn Ewers in the top 10 of the NFL draft.
Catch, C.J. Stroud led the country in passer rating at 177.66.
That's a little bit low for most. I mean, we're used to seeing quarterbacks. It's the OU quarterbacks that distort the numbers, because you were seeing Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield for about 5 years there. We're hitting 200 every year. Yeah. 190 is elite of the elite. Stroud was like borderline elite of the elite, but clearly he was the best in the country this year. That just goes to show that maybe this year there wasn't a true elite of the elite of the elite as a passer. But yeah, 170 in Quinn's in the first round this year. And Arch Manning is starting in 2024. And Quinn is like holla.
Caleb Williams is number 5 in the country at 168.54.
And that doesn't include, that's why, QBR would take into account the running component that Caleb brings to the table. But yeah, I mean, like I said, that gets him into the first round. 160, 165. I almost have to see it, right? I only know what it looks like when I think people greatly underestimate how good Casey was when he didn't have a mashed up finger, and he was at times pretty good when he did. Yeah, somewhere between 165 and 170. Because I think NFL evaluators want to be given a reason to fall in love with Quinn Ewers. He just got to play better. He wins a Big 12 championship, he's a first-round draft pick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, done. Just so for comparison, because I got the numbers in front of me. So when you just mentioned certain guys, Stetson Bennett from Georgia was at 160 161.19. Frank Harris from UTSA, 160.70. Max Duggan was at 159.24. I'm just giving you some of the notable names in that kind of range that you're talking about.
Interesting that the numbers were lower this year than they've been, I think, in recent years.
And Bryce Young was at 163.20.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting that the passing game numbers tapered off in such a way where anything above 160 was considered nationally elite, when Casey Thompson was at 160 and higher than that for most of 2021.
Of course, I can only imagine what maybe look up Casey now though. What was he? Casey was actually at 150.10.
He was okay.
Okay, it was okay, not great.
I mean, he almost lost his job, but he still was respectable.
Yeah. No, but you start doing. I just had when Tom. It's a good question by Tom. I had the numbers in front of me. Just want to.
Tom, I'm glad you asked that question. We went down a path I wasn't completely ready to go down. Any other topics you want to get into today?
By the way, you guys can see Tom usually comes on Drunk Uncles every Wednesday night. So Tom ends up being has been a frequent contributor to the show, and I enjoy having him on. And Tom and I almost got into a scuffle with a Washington fan, and that during in San Antonio. So that part was cool. So I always am going to love Tom. That's my dude. What we talked about AD. Oh, well, yeah. Well, I know we can go forever. So we've had Junior Day. Obviously, that was this past weekend. We would love to, kind of get some of your thoughts, on that. Like I said, as a guy, I wouldn't mind talking Junior Day a little bit as of today, because we'll wait on the Jacksonville coach and see what that. I think we're still in a holding pattern as far as that is concerned. Junior Day was probably a little bit more interesting for me.
I think that the thing about the Junior Days now is that you have to completely recalibrate your expectations for what's valuable from them. In the old days, commitments, so many of them would come from a Junior Day that Texas didn't get any commitments this weekend. But it got at least 9 super blue chip players from both the 2024 and 2025 classes on campus that allowed Texas to put a notch on their belt. Now, we can argue about the value of needing to get 5 or 6 visits from guys during an NIL world, but certainly with in-state players, that rule still mostly applies. I mean, I guarantee if we go back and we count the visits that John Tate Cook or Anthony Hill or any of the guys they signed that were super blue chips from in-state, Malik Muhammad this year, I promise you that all those visits added up to Texas getting to the point where they got the players that they got. Sometimes when guys start looking around, you just got to get them on campus again and let them get up close with what you've got. So Texas put notches on the belt for some really important players this season. If you do it by comparison to A&M, they had twice as many super blue chips on campus as A&M did. And the thing that was really interesting was that Texas went heavy on 2025. Felt like Texas had 24 really important 2025 players on campus. And I counted one from A&M that you would talk about as a blue chip guy. Mm-hmm. So, look, what does it mean to have a significantly more impressive Junior Day turnout than another school? We'll see, right? It may turn out to be insignificant in the greater scale of what happens in the 2024 recruiting class. But if forced to choose one alternative or the other, you would take the situation where all of the guys show up versus none of the guys or nearly none of the guys. So I thought it was a really good weekend for Texas to be able to get that many super blue chip players on prospect. that many prospects on campus. Now you've got to be able to do it again. That'll end up being the key for all of the guys that came in this weekend. Now you've got to get those guys back in the spring. Got to get them for the spring game. Then you probably need to have them show up during the summer. So it's all part of and the guys that you don't get showing up on campus for events like these, it's really the first recognition of, we got to do more work for guys like that. When we think about a guy like Colin Simmons, who some people think is the number one prospect in the state of Texas, I've got him rated number 2 behind Micah Hudson, who did show up on campus. You know, it's like, oh, that guy went to Alabama last week, but didn't drive to Texas. Like, there's some, symbolism with regards to the work that Texas has to do. So I think part of what this weekend does, it allows you to kind of take a real good analysis of who are we in for really well, and who do we need to get back on campus more and maybe make up some ground with. And I think you saw a little bit of that this weekend. And I think if you're Texas A&M and you say to yourself, we really only had one in-state difference maker on campus this weekend from the 2024 recruiting class. They've got to do better. Texas had 4 or 5 on campus, and I would still say if you're Texas, you want to do better. But if you're comparing the two things, if you were nitpicking Steve Sarkisian could rightfully say, dude, we had a ton of talent. Did you see what was at A&M? And it would be a fair retort.
I mean, it was, a ton of guys, like to your point, that was out there, not the heavy, back in the day, like you're getting your guys to commit kind of thing. You said a couple of things that I wanted to make sure I just address. You talked about like junior day and importance, where's that ranking, like the NIL era. I recently spoke to a coach. He told me that he's like, look, at the end of the day, NIL will apply to the elite of the elite. He goes, but then there's everybody else that you're recruiting, and that's not going to be based off of just NIL deals. That's going to be, to your point, getting guys on campus, still selling mom, still selling the dad, like still selling the kid, like still having those things out there. So the elite of the elite catch, that NIL will matter. For every other, high 3-star, mid 4-star, like those guys ain't getting, 500 G's thrown at them or something to that effect. And I obviously know you have to wait till you get on campus. Come on. All right. But so I just wanted to make sure I wanted to throw that
disclaimer.
Disclaimer. Hey, yes.
What we need is, when you start talking about it, we need Blake to put a running scroll with a disclaimer, like when there's a tornado warning, for all counties, including. You just need to have that roll across the bottom of the screen.
Yes, the opinions expressed on this show of Ronald Richardson and Alvin Richardson alone does not reflect the opinions of Orangebloods, Jeff Ketchum, Rivals.com, or any other subsidiaries. And then when it comes to the junior day, though, Ketch, is it interested to me because you using your quarterback is kind of like creme de la creme, that you're kind of the prince of the ball, I guess, for lack of a terms. I don't know if this prince of the ball, or maybe it's belle of the ball, or I don't know, headliner. Your QB is already committed, but you had so many other good guys that were in there. But here's what was interesting to me that I noted in my column, Catch. I think if I'm correct, 5 offers went out this weekend, and all 5 were to linemen on the offensive and defensive side of the board. It seemed to be, I mean, it's not to say that they don't have scholarship offers out. They don't, clearly they already have scholarship offers out. Guys who stepped on campus did have some offers. But that was an interesting, me trying to wrap my head around, like, they are really, when we talked about earlier about stacking the room, Catch, to know that that's what the offers that went out specifically on this day, I mean, almost sent to me the bat signal of, this is one of the big positions of importance for this program going for the 2024 class. I don't know if that was your takeaway. Maybe it was just coincidence by stretch of imagination, but I found that to be interesting that those were the only offers were to the linemen.
I had a slightly different reaction to the exact same thing.
Okay.
Number one, partly they already have like 120 offers out. So what was really notable was that there weren't more offers because most of the guys that they want, they've already offered. So, the purpose of Junior Day used to be receiving the offers. So it made me think that the offers that went out this weekend were non-committable offers because these guys that got offered this weekend I'm speaking very generically because maybe a couple of these guys end up being members of the 2024 recruiting class, but they're not the primary targets. The primary targets already have offers. And if you think about it, like position by position, Texas already has its quarterback. Texas is only looking for 2 running backs. And one of them is a 5-star guy from IMG that they literally had on campus this weekend. Like that kid's dad has said before this weekend that Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee are the top 3. So you're probably in a situation where you're not going to go overboard there. They don't have a wide receivers coach. Otherwise, we might have seen something there. So, yeah, the offers went out to linemen this weekend. I think they're going to take more of those. You might see them take between 3 and 5 offensive linemen. You might see them take at least that many defensive linemen. That linemen may take up half of this recruiting class. So there are going to be more offers out. But not one of those guys that got offers are elite of the elite level prospects.
Wow.
So, and Bo Davis just likes to make offers. He loves it. Bo Davis gets jittery if a day goes by and he hasn't made an offer. So when they go out, I take a little bit with a little grain of salt because his position group's going to have more offers out than probably any that are out there. And Kyle Flood's not far away from that. He likes to make a lot of offers as well, even if they'll be we've heard Sarkisian say this. They can fill up with guys pretty quickly if they want to. It's about getting the best guys. And for the most part, they make sure the best guys already have offers before events like these.
Was there any of the guys that they offered that you liked a lot at all, or they were just kind of guys that you're just going to keep an eye on?
I think they're guys you absolutely keep an eye on, but not a single one of the guys that receive offers this weekend have been rated by Rivals.com.
Okay, gotcha.
So now one was a 2025 guy, a defensive tackle, but at this point, those guys don't have profiles that are full of scholarship. Like, for instance, I'm going to click on Blake Frazier is an offensive tackle for Vandergrift out of Austin. Now, he's got 17 offers. So he's a guy. But I don't know that and he's 6'6", 260, so he's got some of the traits that that Kyle Flood likes. If he's going to show up for an event like this, you probably need to offer him, or you're going to make that kid feel insulted, given the fact that he's got offers out from Auburn and Clemson, and that's an interesting one. But if you look at the schools that are the litmus tests for players in this area, Oklahoma hasn't offered, but A&M has. They did this weekend, or Texas did this, and Texas has now. But there's no, and LSU has. So a guy like Blake Frazier, probably a little bit different than some of the guys. Bennett Warren is another guy that they offered from Sugarland, Fort Bend Baptist. But this is a guy that when you look at his offer list, well, and even he's starting to, He's got A&M, and he's got Oklahoma, no LSU, no Baylor yet. Like, I mean, he's a guy that has some big-time offers, but he's mostly a regional guy, and maybe you start to see his stock take off this spring. Mm-hmm. So I would say the guys that were offered this past weekend were guys who were rising.
Okay.
Probably weren't on the radar significantly 3 months ago, but now they are.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, that's good to know. That is good. Rising is not a bad thing, right? And I mean, we can, from a rankings perspective, and I think this is kind of, you tell me if it's incorrect to say, but sometimes the guys may not be ranked, then the offers start coming in, and in rivals, a lot of the other services will start to maybe reevaluate, start to look at the film a little bit more, and maybe that guy gets to start at a 3-star with the potential of kind of going up, right? I mean, if you get a major offer,
normally the super blue chips are kind of the last few, in a state like Texas, in the last few years, the super blue chips were kind of super blue chips all the way along. Mm-hmm. There's usually maybe 4 or 5 that reach that level of status that are outside of that territory at this part of the year. And then you've got camps, events, games. You have all these data points that will eventually allow for them to have the showcase that can lift them up. Mm-hmm. But if we look at last year's rankings, most of the guys, if we think about Texas, right, just the guys that signed with Texas, Jonte Cook, Malik Muhammad, Anthony Hill, all those dudes were identified very, very early. So my guess is you'll find that most of the guys, maybe all of the guys that were offered this weekend will fall just below super blue chip status when it's all said and done. It doesn't mean that they can't succeed or they're horrible prospects, but it means that your expectations of what you will likely get out of them needs to be somewhat adjusted compared to the biggest of the biggest guys that show up.
Okay, gotcha. All right, fair enough. Good perspective. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up because I need a drink of something. My voice is starting to go. Okay. Thanks to RogueShop.com, promo code Orangebloods. Take advantage of the discount. You only get it with that promo code Orangebloods for any need that you might have. I can almost assure you RogueShop.com has something to help aches and pains and sleeping issues, or you just want to take the edge off a little bit. Like, that's what they specialize in. Let them help you out. For myself and Anwar Richardson and Blake, thanks for hanging out with us on a Monday afternoon for the Monday Overreaction Show. We'll see you throughout the week. Take care. Later.